Well, hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Unlock Show. I'm your host, Tracy Wilson. My pleasure to be here with you guys this morning because I have got a super duper treat for you today with one of these amazing guests that I have lined up. As you guys know, we have really top class guests on the Unlock Show, and today is absolutely no exception to that rule. I've got the amazing Steve Fredlund with me, all the way from Minnesota, and he and I have just been having a great conversation behind the scenes about life in general, how we can make sure that we're living a really vibrant and life, and that we actually cultivate that with some level of intention. So I've got some questions for you guys today. Whether you're starting out in business or whether you even work for somebody else, you might be in the corporate world. You are a leader, and to me, it doesn't matter whether or not you have staff members that are working with you, for you, you have a team of people, whether you are leading a band of one, in some way, shape, or form, you are a leader. And sometimes, as we go on this journey of leadership, we can get a little bit lost and we can become a little bit unhappy. And we then start to think about, how the heck do I bring back happiness? Where do I find the happiness in my leadership? How do I cultivate a team that is actually happy and vibrant? Well, today's guest is going to share with you all of his findings. After 30 years in corporate and also in business, he has done some amazing things. He's traveled the world speaking on many stages. He's also been a 2 times TED Talk speaker on this particular topic. So I want you guys to listen up today. I want you to really think about the things that Steve speaks to us about and how you can bring those things into your life so that you too can create and cultivate a life that is full of vibrancy, is full of happiness, and that you too are able to be the most exceptional leader to yourself, to your family, and to those around you. So I want to welcome to the show, Steve. Fantastic to have you here.
Oh, Tracy, it's great to be here. With that whole introduction, I'm like ready to go. Let's go. That was fantastic.
Awesome. Well, hey, look, as I mentioned to everybody a little bit earlier, you and I were having a bit of a chat behind the scenes, and you've told me some of the amazing things that you've done. But one of the things I'm really interested in is, I know through reading your bio that you made a bit of a change about 15 years ago, and you started really thinking about this concept of leadership and how you can become, how do you become a happy leader? So I'm wondering, what was it that actually sparked that? What was it that took you down the path of thinking, hey, I need to change something here. Maybe I'm unhappy right now and I need to find the pathway to happiness. What happened?
Yeah, it really was that. Everything was going great in the corporate world. I'd just been promoted. Everything was like on top and rising, right? Like great relationship with my wife, my kids. Everything was amazing, but I was feeling absolutely miserable and I couldn't explain it. And I live in Minnesota in the USA, and there's this bridge that goes across the Mississippi River called the Stone Arch Bridge. And every afternoon I would walk across that on my lunch hour, trying to figure out why I was so miserable, because it didn't make any sense, right? On paper, everything was perfect. My life was amazing. Like so many people would trade their life on paper for mine, but internally I was just so miserable and I could not figure out what was going on. And I didn't believe it was clinical depression or anxiety, some of those issues that people struggle with. It was just, I felt like I was living this good life, but I was trapped. And I felt like I had nobody to complain to about. Like, what right did I have to complain about it, right? Like I was, 35 years old, everything was great. And, who am I going to complain to? I grew up really poor. I can't talk to my mom because what am I going to tell her? And so it just felt like I was trapped in this good life and just super miserable. And then eventually I connected with my mentor and I just said, what is going on here? And he helped me figure some things out that made me realize that I was just not aligned with the life of who I was and what I wanted to do, what I was passionate about, what my strengths were no longer aligned to the job I was being asked to do after I got promoted. And it was really just that misalignment that made me realize how important it was to really truly understand who I was and try to line up my life, my work life to those things, because it was that misalignment that was driving my unhappiness. And so once I realized that, I started becoming more intentional about doing things that made me happy, that lined up with who I really, truly, authentically was, and then start beating that drum and start telling other people about that. Because as it turns out, as I started sharing my story about being unhappy in my work life, I wasn't alone. There's a lot of people who on paper had this great life, but were really miserable inside. And so that was really the start of that journey.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And I think about, even just yesterday, I had to go out and run a couple of errands, and one of which was to get a new photograph for my passport, because I'm about to do some travel in the latter part of this year. And anyway, I walked into our local post office, and the woman that was behind the counter there, clearly, I think, I would hope that this episode she would listen to, because honestly, you could actually tell that she was totally unhappy, and more likely than not, it is also because she was totally misaligned with what she was wanting to do. Her job, or her, her way of life had become totally out of balance and off, off the scale of where she wanted to be, because she just clearly was not a happy person in her job. So when that happened, Steve, and you started talking with your mentor, what were some of the things that where did you have to go? Like, how far down did you have to dig to really realize that, oh my gosh, this is the case? Because I think this would be a fairly commonplace issue, where a lot of people on the outside are like, what have I got to complain about? If I complain to somebody, they're just going to look at me like, what's wrong with,
Right.
What are you complaining about? What's wrong with you? You've got everything together. So like you say, on the outside, everything looks just swimming, but on the inside, it's like, I am absolutely drowning here and I don't know where to go. So what were some of the things that he got you to do to really understand that this is the case? It's not because I'm clinically depressed. It's not because, I'm being selfish in this moment. It's not any of those things. It's a pure misalignment.
Yeah, and what you said is, just before I touch on that, what you said is so true. It was that layer of guilt on top of this. What right do I have to be unhappy? There's that piece that just made it so difficult. American, middle-aged male, educated, with every opportunity in the world, and I'm still miserable. So that added a layer of unhappiness, because I couldn't understand it, and I felt guilty that I was unhappy. But the interesting thing is, in this particular case, and I've had some other issues we've had to dig really deep in, but with this case, it was literally like 15 minutes. Literally, like, I would go across every day wondering why I'm so unhappy. I finally called him. I said, we need to get together. He luckily canceled his meetings. We had dinner. And within 15 minutes, he had this thing basically figured out, because it wasn't that complicated from an outsider's perspective. What he did, and he was actually a professor of mine when I went through my MBA program, my Master's of Business Administration. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out to him, and he said to me right away, he said, okay, well, you just had this big promotion. Now, do you remember when we did the Strengths Finders assessment? It's like a personality test, only it's really based on your strengths. And I said, I do remember that when we went through the program. He said, what were your top 5 strengths? I said, learner, relator, achiever, strategic, and self-assurance. And I think he was very proud of me for remembering those. But I'm like, I remember those. He said, okay, now, before you got the promotion, give me a 0 to 5 rating on how much you were utilizing each of those strengths on your job. And they were all like 4s and 5s. He said, now, since you've been promoted, and the promotion moved me out of an individual contributor into more of a management role. He said, now, since you've been promoted, how much are you utilizing those strengths? And they're like 0s and 1s. He said, this is not that difficult. What's happening is that you are no longer lined up with your strengths. You are actually grieving the loss of utilizing your strengths. You're now being asked to do things that you aren't wired to do and that you're not passionate about and that aren't your strengths. And it was very clear. I'm like, how could I not see this? How could I not see this? Because I got hung up on a promotion is what you are supposed to do, right? That's what you should do. That's the default, right? You go into the corporate world, and what you should do is you should work really hard, and then you should get paid more money, and then you should get promoted, and then you should work really hard, and then you should get promoted. Like, this is what you should do. And the problem is I got hung up on the should, right? I let people should on me, if you will. I said S-H-U-L-D. But, and so I followed the right way to do it, the way that I should do it, and it made me miserable. And the reason is because that promotion made me misaligned from my real strengths. So in this case, he saw it right away, and I was like, how could I not see this?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And like you say, I think, often we'll go through life and we'll we'll do things in a way that we think we should do, the
Yeah.
way that society thinks we should be doing things, and therefore we tend to follow that pathway, and we neglect, or we don't take the moments to say, well, actually, is
Yeah.
that pathway going to take me off track to my true self, my true calling, the innate strengths that I actually
Mm-hmm.
have? And if I could only recognize those at every move I make, oh my gosh, what a completely different life you would create. So let's fast forward on that just a little, because you know at this point we've got this amazing promotion. You should be happy, Steve. Like, you've
Yeah.
got a promotion, right? What's
What's
wrong with
wrong
you,
with you? Right.
man?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? You should have that. So how did you now navigate your way out of that? Because you touched on that piece of guilt,
Yeah.
because once we've sort of grabbed onto that element of guilt, and we've layered that all over us, and we've said, oh my god, I feel so guilty, now you'll be thinking, okay, how do I get out of this? Because now I've only been in this job for a short period of time. I'm gonna I'm gonna let people down. What are people going to think of me? I feel guilty. How did you navigate your way through that?
Yeah, I did something incredibly countercultural. I went
Mm-hmm.
to my boss and I said, this job is not for me. And I apologize that I thought it was. I thought I'd be excited about this. I'm grateful for the promotion, all of those things, but this is not who I am. I'm going to be much more valuable to the company as an individual contributor, as somebody who solves complex problems, but doesn't have the responsibility for managing people. I think you're going to see more value. And that's frankly the reason why I got promoted, is because I was able to solve these really complex problems. So you have success and they promote you. And it was very humbling to do that. They were at first sort of very, very, very surprised, right? Because who turns down a promotion? They'd already made all the announcements. Like, it's all of this stuff, but I said, I'm not going to last here. I can keep trying to fight through this thing, but honestly, in another month or two, I'm going to be looking for another job, because that's it. And, they didn't want to lose me as an employee. And so it worked out that just through communication and honestly, just being frank with them and saying, this is not who I am. I appreciate it. It doesn't mean I'm lesser than, and they were graceful about that. But just said, I want to back out of this promotion. And it was a very countercultural thing to do, because who does that, right? Like, it was significantly more money. It was the next level of bonus pay and all of these accolades that come, and the recognition that comes from being at this certain level. And you have an office, a bigger office, and all this stuff that, I thought I cared about. But when I was miserable, I realized that stuff I don't. Yeah, if all things equal, I would like more pay and more benefits and more bonus and a bigger office. That'd be great. But all things weren't equal. I was miserable, and so my choice was to either suck it up and try to fight through it and try to morph into being somebody I wasn't, or just say, "Yep, it didn't work." And so the way I navigated out of it was just letting them know, and then we reverted back to the position I'd had prior.
And I think there's some real courage that you would have had to have found to be able to have that kind of conversation, and I applaud you for actually doing that. I'm interested, because there'll be a lot of people obviously that will be potentially listening to today's show and thinking, gosh, I'm not real happy with my job, or I'm not happy in some area of my life. So in your experience now, I would imagine that there would be times where the unhappiness doesn't always manifest itself necessarily it might manifest itself and start at work, but it starts to seep its way into other areas of life. And we may not always attribute that unhappiness to maybe our job, maybe the leadership role that I'm in, or how to get out of that, because we've now seen it pop up maybe in your personal life. What are some of the things that maybe you saw that happened firsthand, or that over time now you've seen this happen with others, and then it's been brought back to actually that's the problem?
Yeah, I think if I understand correctly, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's the stress and the struggle at work and the misalignment at work that then causes the personal life, and sometimes it's the other way around. It's the misalignment in our personal lives. We're end up working with an organization that we don't align to, or we're in unhealthy friendships, or whatever it might be, and we might not even recognize that that's the issue. but it's sort of taking this toll on us. And then, yeah, it's all, even though we do these different things, I use the analogy of Jeeps, right? We're in different Jeeps in different parts of our safari in our life. We have our work Jeep and our personal Jeep and maybe our volunteer Jeep and our hobbies Jeep, but they intersect, right? They all impact each other. And so, yeah, I see this creeping in. And I think the biggest issue that I found with people that don't really understand what they're going through and why they're unhappy and why they're miserable, and like the person at the post office, maybe they know they're miserable, maybe they don't, maybe they can't figure out why, maybe they think it's the job, but it's not really the job, maybe the job is perfect for them, it's something else that's going on. And I think the biggest issue is that a lot of people, most of us, don't have clarity on what we really want out of life and what really alignment even is. When we say, okay, well, what do you want? What are your strengths? What are your passions? We don't really know. And so I think what happens is we don't know. And so we just have to get lucky, right? We just have to kind of get lucky that things are aligned. And when they're not, we're miserable. And we don't really understand what's driving that. We don't really understand that it's misalignment because we don't even know what we really want. We're just kind of miserable and we don't get it. And we don't do the hard work of figuring that out. So I think for me, the biggest takeaway is clarity, clarity, clarity. I think, until we really know who we are, who we authentically are, what we really want out of life, what we really want out of our job or our friendships or whatever that might be, we're just sort of hit or miss. We don't have a target to actually be intentional about. And so I think that's the missing piece for a lot of people that I've talked to that are miserable. They come to me and they say they're miserable. And I say, well, tell me a little bit about what you want out of life. They don't know. And that's not a judgment. It's just the reality that most of us don't really know what we want out of life. Or they say something, I just want to be happy. Well, tell me what is happiness to you? Especially, in the small business world, I work with a lot of small businesses. I say, well, what do you want out of your small business? Well, I want to make more money and spend less time doing it. Well, then I ask the next set of questions and they can't answer it. What does that even look like? I don't know. What is your ideal schedule? What do you want? I don't know. Well, then you're just sort of, you don't have a target to try to make decisions based on. And so you're just kind of trying to get lucky and hopefully alignment finds its way to you.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Excuse me, that we have these, these beautiful lives. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, that, it's not until we get a little bit older, I'd say in our 40s, that we start thinking, oh my gosh, where we thought, looking back, life was such a long, beautiful life. You're going to live till you're 80 odd. You get to 40 and you start thinking, gosh, time is ticking. And really, when you look at things, time goes really, really fast. So how does, and if we think about the number of people, like you're saying, the vast majority don't have clarity, what sort of questions can we start asking ourselves to find some level of clarity so that we can understand and start moving forward with intention, so that we can start creating a life of intentional being and vibrancy? How do we actually do that? What questions can we ask ourselves?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that you can do. There's a lot of personal coaches. I've done some of this and kind of ask the right questions, but part of it is really understanding who you are. First of all, who are you? What do you want out of life? Where do you want to go? How do you want to get there? What are your values? What are those things that you really truly value? Where are you trying to go? What are your goals in life? What are your objectives? One of the questions might be, 40 years after you pass, how do you want people to remember you? And there's no right answer. The only right answer is whatever you choose there to be. If I say, well, man, I want to be remembered as somebody who left a legacy in this world, well, that might not be your thing. And so I think a mistake that people make is they go, oh, that sounds really good. They read something or heard a speaker and they're like, oh man, they want to leave a legacy. That's what I want. But then they start living that way, and that's not really what they want, and that's okay. And so I think what's really hard is to answer those questions truly and authentically and strip away all of the expectations that others might have of us, strip away all of the shoulds, strip away all of that stuff and say, no, truly you. What do you really want? How do you want to live? What kind of people do you want to be around? What do you want? How do you want to be remembered? And so I think those are the kind of questions that we need to ask. And they're really hard to answer unless you have a really gifted person asking you the next question. I think because we just answer once and we're like, oh, okay, that's fine. I want to leave a legacy. Well, what does that mean? Leave a legacy. What does that even mean? You want to leave a bunch of money to your kids? You want to be remembered as a kind person? You want to start a scholarship? Like, what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. And so we have to kind of fight through some of those things. And even just how do we want to live our days? What is a good day? And one of the questions I ask people, I even ask this during interviews, which kind of wigs people out, especially young people.
Mm-hmm.
They tell me about a day where you actually went to bed at night, you put your head on the pillow, and you thought, that was a great day. If I could only repeat that day, my life would be wonderful. What is that? What happened to that day? Was it a beautiful bike ride? Was it you got a chance to paint scene? Was it a walk in the woods? Was it just hanging out with friends? Was it one-on-one friendship? Was it getting a ton done? Was it being really productive at work? Like, what was it that day that just stirred you up, solving a complex problem? What was it? And I think those are the kind of problems or the kind of questions that can give us clues into who we really are and what we really want. And then the other tool and resource is sort of even taking personality exams. I mentioned Strengths Finders, but there's a ton of different personality tests: the Enneagram, MBTI, Myers-Briggs, all of these different things. And I used to be really somebody that said those are a joke. Like, why would you want to do that? Because I only had to take one if I was up for promotion. I'm like, this is stupid. How can I answer 50 questions and somebody's going to figure out who I am? And then the Strengths Finders thing happened, that Stone Arch Bridge moment with my mentor, Paul, where he used Strengths Finders to show me how I was misaligned. And I became a big proponent of those. And so I encourage people not just take one of them, but take a few of them, because they're different purposes for those tests, and then look for themes. And so if you're struggling to figure out like who you are, your identity, how you're wired, what you enjoy, sometimes those can actually really be helpful. Look for the themes in there, and then show it to people that know you the best and say, do you agree with this? And so I think it's a combination of being asked questions, answering questions yourself, and then taking some resources like that and putting them to use.
And like you say, sometimes it is a great idea just to get somebody else, a mentor, a coach, to actually work with, because they'll dig deep. They'll ask you some really deep questions that will get you to think and start really uncovering who you really are. What are you about? There's this great one, actually. And I'm pretty sure it's Tony Robbins, actually, that asks this very simple question: but why?
Yeah.
So when you're asking those questions of, so what do you want in life? Well, I want to build a legacy, but why?
Why?
And then the next thing, and it's like 7 layers deep.
Seven
and
whys.
if you can,
yeah.
you continue to ask yourself that why at least 7 times, you might just get to the crux of what you're really about. But I love those. I'm in agreement with you. I can remember doing those back in my corporate days too, and thinking, oh, what this load of nonsense about. And then all of a sudden realizing that actually there's a lot of strength in doing these and doing multiple different ones for those purposes of they just have a slightly different intention with them.
Yeah, and one of the things I've done with sorry to cut you off there, but one of the things I've done with the seven whys is a great exercise too that people could do. For each part of your life, think, okay, what are the different major areas of your life? Okay, work, family, friends, hobbies, whatever they are. Write down, for each one of those independently. Write down, what do you really want out of those? What do you want out of a relationship? Whether you're in one or not. What do you want out of friendships? What do you want? So write each of those things down independently, and then do like exactly what you said. Ask why, and then for each one, don't think ahead. Just for each one, why do I want, somebody to love me? Why do I want to be recognized? Why do I want to be productive? Whatever it is, write the why down for sure for each one of those, and then do them all, and then go back through it again. Okay, now answer each one of those why. And do that for all of them again until you can't answer them for any of them, and then sort of combine it all and look for the threads. And you're going to see some amazing continuity between there, that often the real core why that you want at work is the same core why that you want in your personal life. It's the same core why that you want out of a volunteer experience. That's where you get to the heart of who you really are, what makes you tick. And so that's a great way to kind of take that why exercise and expand it broadly, and take your time doing it. And boy, you're going to see some themes come out of there and go like, that's it. That's it. I want to be respected, or, I just want to be unconditionally loved, or I just want to solve complex problems. Who knows, whatever it is. And that's going to hold the key then to how you become happier.
Absolutely. And then you've got something that's going to, it's almost like your North Star, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like that is the thing that is going to hold me steady in whatever I do. Moving forward, if you apply for that promotion, you can say, well, is that actually going to, enable me to do whatever that North Star is? And if the answer is yes, then it's most likely a great opportunity for you to pursue. And if the answer is no, then you might cut it off at the post and say, this is not somewhere I want to go right now because it's not in alignment with me, and it's not going to, my happiness is at risk if I go down that path.
Yeah, and you're
So I
hitting on
think it's a
the
great
two big pieces.
exercise.
Sorry
Mm.
again. You're hitting
No,
on those
you
two
go.
big pieces, like the clarity thing. Like I still feel like that's like 95% of the work. I know, Einstein said if I had an hour to solve the problem, I'd spend 55 minutes on the problem and 5 minutes on the solution. And I think so. You do all that hard work and you get that North Star, like you're talking about. But then what you're talking about is that intentionality of actually using it, of actually making decisions based on it. Because it's one thing if we understand the North Star, but if we never use it in our decision making, it's lost. But if what you're saying is saying now that we have that, is which decision is going to move me closer to that? Do I stay in my current home? Do I move? Do I travel to New Zealand or do I not? Like, which one is bringing me closer to the North Star? So again, I apologize, I kind of jumped in there, but what you said was so good. Like, clarity without that intentionality is just sort of like, okay, now I'm just dreaming. It's that intentionality that actually makes it real and actually starts to realign us. It's like when you go to the chiropractor and they fix your back. Like when when you start making decisions based on your North Star, that's when your back starts getting realigned.
Absolutely. And just back to you were talking about an analogy of having a Jeep, and that, now we're, whatever journey we are going on, what passengers, what people are we going to put in our Jeep that we're going to enjoy the journey with. And so that North Star becomes almost like the Jeep. That's the one thing that I know is going to go with me no matter where I go. And now I'm determining, okay, well, who am I going to actually load my car up with, that I'm going to enjoy the journey with. And I know that you do that in every area, of your life, whether it's your personal, your professional, your hobbies, whatever it is, you're always able to come back to that. I know one of the things that you've spoken about in the past is this concept of default driven leadership. Can you tell us a little bit more about what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like what we talked about before with the promotion, that so many of us lead by default. We just do things the way that we should do them, right? Well, that's what we're supposed to do, or we do them, based on what other people expect of us. That's what default driven leadership is. Rather than saying what are my core values, where am I really trying to go, what's it going to take to get there, and maybe even breaking new ground. A lot of us are stuck in just doing things the way they've always been done. And some of that's just because it's easier, right? We can be lazy and just say, well, that's easier. But I think some of that, what's really embedded in some of that when we lead by default, is that we feel like it's less risky. What I mean by that is that, okay, if I take over a position and it's something that you've been doing the whole time, and then something goes wrong, and I'm doing it the same way that Tracy always did it, I can say, well, that's the way we've always done it. That's the way Tracy did it. Versus if I make a change and now things go wrong, it's kind of on me. And so I think there's a little bit of a risk management piece that's embedded in doing things by default. But yeah, I mean, I think what happens is we don't progress. And a lot of times we are hired into leadership positions, or we start a company because we can take things to the next level. They don't want us to do things the way they've always been done, but we get caught up into doing that. Either we get busy or whatever it is. But I think there's so much pressure on us to do things the right way, the way that people expect of us. And I think that's what dampens growth. That's what dampens creativity and innovation. And sometimes it's frankly just because we're too busy, right? We haven't actually equipped our leaders to have the time necessary to be innovative, to be strategic, to be visionary. And so they get caught up just doing the day-to-day stuff. So for whatever the reason is, that's what I mean by default driven leadership. And I use the analogy, it's like, we lead like we're choosing toothpaste, right? Or we, because, who chooses their toothpaste? Most of us have never really done like a deep dive. Which toothpaste tastes the best and which one is the most effective? We usually have our toothpaste based on what we grew up with, or what our, if we, our roommate or our, whoever we're living with, whatever they use. most of us haven't done it. And so we just use whatever toothpaste is out there. We don't really care. We grew up using Crest, so now we use Crest. And I think sometimes we lead that same way. We just lead the way it's always been done. And it's just lazy. And frankly, we end up misaligned a lot of times because the way that they did it before isn't really what we're about, but we're doing it that same way. And now we're misaligned, and pretty soon we become unhappy. Pretty soon we become miserable. Pretty soon we lose our job, or we take it out on our employees, or something just goes off and things are just not happy and they're not productive.
I mean, interesting analogy around the toothpaste, and that's dead right. You do tend to do things because they've always been done that way without really taking the time to think about what's actually best for me. So if we fast forward a little bit, because we've talked about, obviously that corporate career, and then you having the, realizing that at the time, gosh, there's a misalignment here, and going through that process and realizing, wow, I don't think I'm alone with this. I think there are millions of people around the world who are in a similar should be position, because they're doing things the way that they think should be done.
Mm-hmm.
When you started making this change, what sort of things started happening in your life?
Yeah, I became happier. I mean, that
wow.
thing that happened, so taking that position, and then ultimately I left the company, not because of that, but I went to a different company, and I was always in these roles where this is what I want to do. I want to solve complex problems. That's what I love doing. And so I would pass up on different opportunities for the ability to solve new problems, the ability to do a lot of different things, because I'm a multi-passionate person. And so what it did is, once I came to that realization that this is who I am, and I didn't need to apologize for it, this is who I am. I'm not going to become an executive Fortune 500 leader. I'm just not. I don't want it. Even if I could, I don't want it. And so it sort of led me down a path of making more intentional decisions around my career. And that's what made me happier. And then eventually I did leave the corporate world altogether about 4 years ago. I just said, this is not who I want to be. And so I left that, gave up, a nice career to do something that I really felt like I wanted to do with people that I felt like were more aligned with who I was. For many years, I kind of felt like a poser a little bit. And I had a great corporate career for 25 years, but I never really felt like these were my people. I'm from a small town. I'm a very rural person. My wife and I are fifth generation in the same small town. Our kids are sixth generation. I just love small town people. And so I just started my own business to work with small businesses. That's what I called it, where I'm just working with solopreneurs, mom and pop shops, these people that are just kind of, they're the lifeblood of their communities. They're the people that live there, work there, eat there, play there, volunteer there, raise their kids there. These are my people. And so I gave up, what I was supposed to do for something that I really wanted to do, that I really felt connected with. And it's just made me happier. And so the biggest change that I would say I've seen in my life is that I'm happier. I'm making less money. I'm working more hours, but I've never been happier. So, that's not everybody's secret formula, but for me, that was what took priority.
Yeah, I love that. And I love, that living in a small town. There is something, I grew up in a very small town. I don't live in one now. I live in a big city, but there is really something special about that small town. Having the community around you and being able to give back to that. I know you give back in a much, much bigger way too. I know that, over time, you have been taken to places like Rwanda to do voluntary type work. Tell us a little bit about that and how that all came about, and why you're so passionate about working community, obviously, as a, solving complex problems, but also doing that in such a way that it involves a community. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it sort of touches on the two things I've loved doing my whole life, which is solving complex problems and building community. I love both of those things. And so Rwanda was right in the focal point of that, because, what's more complex than bringing a small area of rural Rwanda into self-sustainability? That's a very complex problem. So I started a nonprofit back in 2009 with the idea of a couple of things. One is, how do we unite the people of East Central Minnesota? How do we get them to work on the same page, to work towards something bigger than themselves? Because there's a lot of divisiveness, politically, spiritually, regionally, education. Everybody has different perspectives. So a lot of disunity. So one of the things I wanted to accomplish is, how can we give us something bigger to work on, where we can maybe let some of those other things fall down because we're all on the same page. We're all working for the children of this one area. So that was one thing. And then I was trying to, move this area of remote northern Rwanda into self-sustainability. And so that was the idea, that East Central Minnesota would unite, would respond, would finance the transformation of this area of northern Rwanda. And so there's a long story of how I kind of got involved in that, got passionate about that. But I fell in love with this idea, and then I went to Rwanda for the first time in 2009, and it changed my life, radically changed my life. And a lot of people will say that, and it did for me. And I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the idea. I fell in love with the impact. I even fell in love with the idea of the questions that it brought up in me, questions of, how can we be on the same planet? Because I would go there, and I'd return from there where they have no electricity, no running water, AIDS is running rampant, all kinds of issues. And 2 days later, I'm sitting in a grocery store that's air conditioned in Minnesota, and there's a whole aisle dedicated to chocolate chips. How do I reconcile that in my brain, that this is the same planet? And so I even loved that those questions were pulled out, into me. And so I fell in love with that. And then I've gone on a total of 4 trips. We've taken 4 different teams over there. We've raised over $3 million without ever having any paid staff, no overhead, no major donors. I'm really proud of that. And we've just seen the absolute transformation of that area. And they have now moved into self-sustainability, where there's no more funding going into that community at all. They're fully on their own. And it's something I'm really proud of, something I'm still very passionate about. And those experiences will be with me forever.
Well, firstly, congratulations. And, I take my hat off to you for really being instrumental, or the person who really took the reins and brought your community together to actually go and help another community. But isn't that fascinating that I know one of the things too that you talk about is this power of the shared, power of shared passion, and utilizing that to get everybody together, bring them on that same page, and then almost had to export them into a completely different world and say it's almost as if it's a different world, right? Let's go and go and do something over there, and when we come back, it brings this different level of appreciation, I would imagine, for where you are now. So when you did that, as far as this concept of the power of shared passion, but then also overlaying this concept of leadership, because as you being the leader that's taking these people there, each and every one of them, individuals, would have had some level of self-leadership to have been able to get up, get going, get themselves over there and actually do what they needed to do in such a unfamiliar territory. Like how did you do that, and what was the power of that shared passion, but also how did each and every one of them manage themselves individually to make sure that the project, the mission, was completed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first trip, there was only four of us that went. Each other trip was quite a bit bigger. But I think we maybe didn't even know what we were getting into. None of us on any of the trips had ever been to Africa before. I was 39 years old. I'd never even been outside of the U.S. until I went to Rwanda, East Africa. Like that's, of course, the first place you go. And so I think we kind of knew what to expect. We talked to people, but we didn't really know what to expect. And so it was frankly quite overwhelming. And it was daunting, scary at times, of course. And then on the first trip, they said, you need to go on a safari at the end for a couple of days. And I was like, this isn't a vacation. We don't want to go on a vacation. They said, you're going to need the 2 days just to sort of get into a different mental state and transition back and team build and all those things. So we did that, and that's been a key part of all of this. But I say that because the first time was just, I don't know, like this was crazy. It changed me. It impacted me, all of those things. And so then on the next few trips, I could really help people prepare for that trip. I knew what they were going to experience. I knew what they're going to see, taste, smell, feel, all of these things. And so it was really helping people get into that state of really understanding what, kind of managing expectations of what they're going to get into. But you still can't really prepare for some of those things. You can't prepare for holding an 18-month-old child that weighs less than 10 pounds. You can't prepare for those kinds of things. So you try to get them in that right place, but it's just hard. You just have to experience it for yourself, but you just let people know they're going to be overwhelmed with emotion, and that's okay. And I just tried to get everybody to a place where they would lean into it. Don't hide from it. Experience it, fully experience it. Whether you're, at the medical center experiencing that child, or some of the other, really hard things that we saw, or you're being chased by elephants and you're all laughing and, that kind of thing. Whatever it is, lean into it, soak it up, take it for every ounce of it. And so that was always my message to people, no matter what's going to happen, try to soak it up. But it's hard to really prepare for that, but just be prepared to be changed.
So after experiencing that, because there's one thing to know what to expect, and then there's another entirely different thing to knowing and actually know, completely
Yes.
different, right? Going
Yes.
there and experiencing it. So after experiencing that and then coming back or going back to Minnesota, what sort of things, like from a leadership standpoint, have you seen people transform? Like, what has actually happened since then?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things. I mean, everything from my own personal gratitude. I still haven't turned on a water faucet in the last 13 years without being grateful that I have running water. Like it's changed. I'm getting emotional, but it's changed me that profoundly. From a leadership perspective, I think what I've learned has been a few different things. One is that when you have a shared vision, when you have that idea of the collective we, that idea of something bigger than ourselves, that we can become part of and help people belong to that. The impact that it had in East Central Minnesota, from all the people that were involved, whether they were giving money, whether they're coming to events, whether they were sewing shirts and pants for kids that we would bring over, donating boots, sewing quilts, whatever it might be, all the people that were involved in that, it transformed them forever. I mean, we could only bring 10, 12 people on every trip, but there was hundreds or thousands of people that were involved. They walked through the exhibits that we would bring in, and they were forever transformed. And so what I learned about leadership is, you can bring something to people, and when you give them the power to see something bigger than themselves and to actually help them belong as part of a community, to really feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And that's a message I heard over and over and over again, because we didn't want major donors. That was always the thing. No major donors. I didn't accept major donations. I would go to these like small nonprofits, like a small church. I remember one board, it was like 3 people on the board, and I think the church had 25 people or something. And this wasn't a religious thing, but just I would bring up to them, and they said, we never thought we could be part of something like this. And so what I learned about leadership is when you can create this incredible vision, and then really help people feel and belong in a real tangible way, that forever changes their life. So there's that. And then what I learned about leadership over in Rwanda is just so many lessons about what's it like to lead from their community members, from their nonprofit leaders, from the people on the ground. What's it like to lead in that sort of a situation? Right? Because we're the Americans, so we have resources. For some people, oh, how fun, you got to go to Africa, right? I mean, we have that benefit, and we get to go back home. We can visit a mud hut, we can visit the 10-pound baby, we can see the maternity ward with no running water, electricity, no floor drain, and the buckets that are just marked placenta and afterbirth. We can see those things and then just come back to our life. What's it like to be a leader in those areas where it's a 40% AIDS prevalence? What's it like to be in a place where people get killed by hippos, and then they're walking home from that funeral and somebody else gets killed by a hippo? Like, these are the people that we're talking with. What's it like to lead in that situation? And you see the heart of these people, and through translators, I was able to figure that out and kind of get some insights there. So, I mean, I could go on and on, sorry, but the leadership lessons are so vast. But the leadership is leadership, no matter where you are. Just like being, their moms care for their babies as much as our moms care for our babies. Their leaders have the same sort of idea that we have here. It's part of a bigger picture. And when you are operating in post-genocide Rwanda, People only know Rwanda for Hotel Rwanda, a movie about the 1994 genocide, where millions of people were killed with machetes and millions of people were exiled, and terrible. But the leadership there that has united Rwanda has been so huge, because it's all about having one united, being a cohesive Rwanda, that we will never make it if we are divided. And so it's the same leadership principles of saying, here's the vision. We have a vision for one Rwanda, and getting people to buy into that and be part of that, and realize that if they have a calf to give, if they're a Hutu family, to give it to a Tutsi family. Like, that's the kind of programs they have, that if they do that, they are being part of this restoration of Rwanda. And so it's the same leadership principles of powerful, compelling, clear vision, and helping people belong and be part of that, and really feel connected into that. Leadership is leadership. It's the same sort of thing, but just in very different applications.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I could talk for hours. So you'll have
I mean, and I could too. I mean, I would just love to listen and hear about the lessons, and it's often, those lessons that we learn, but how do we now translate those back into, because like you say, completely different world. They are total worlds apart. How can I possibly be in, my hometown, where I walk into a supermarket, it's air conditioned, I can go home, I can turn the tap on and running water happens, but yet I go to Rwanda and none of that. It's like, why do they not have this? How can this even be possible, that I can have this and they don't have any? But yet there's something very common about both situations, and that is, it doesn't matter where you are, that you need to have strong leadership to help guide and bring a community together and unite people together, because like you say, we are much stronger as a united force than we are divided and fighting and all sorts of other crazy things going on. You can really start to make some real difference and some change in whatever it is that you're doing. If you can step up, you can create a vision, you can impart that vision and allow those around you to come on board, allow them to have a sense of purpose and a shared passion for what you're doing and be involved. That's how you're going to get, real change happen. It doesn't matter if you're in the corporate world, whether you're a one-man band trying to influence people in, your local community, or you have a large team of people. Those principles apply no matter what the situation.
Yeah,
but I think that's so powerful.
Want to Sorry, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, people, they want to belong to something that has meaning and purpose to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. We all want to belong, right? I mean, the U.S. show Cheers from years ago. We all want to be Norm. We walk into the bar and Norm. We all want to belong. We all want to be valued. Yeah, everybody knows your name. You want to be valued. You want to be part of something bigger. That doesn't change on where you live. Now, what the difference, I think, is that in Rwanda, it's life or death. Like we all need to be on the same page. We all need to work together. We all need to go to market. We all need to trade our chickens for our cassava. We all need to do that. We don't have the luxury of having disunity in Rwanda. Like they need to. It's a matter of survival. In the U.S., it's not a matter of survival, right? We have the luxury where we can disagree with everybody, right? So that's why I think we see more of the disagreement. If it was life or death, we'd probably be more unified, like we were in 9/11, or whatever country has those events that sort of happen. But I think that's where, but we crave that. We crave unity. I think most of us crave unity. We crave a sense of belonging. We crave a sense of community where we are part of something bigger than ourselves, where we are all on the same page. And I think the leaders that can figure that out and actually apply that to their businesses, to their nonprofits, to their hobby groups, to their associations, they're the ones that are going to get momentum. They're the ones that are going to see success and productivity and engagement and retention. Those are the people that are going to do it. And that's why I'm pretty convinced that the greatest corporate leaders, the greatest business leaders are going to come out of the nonprofit sector. I see this already, because when you are leading a nonprofit, you don't have the same levers that you have to pull in the corporate world. You can't say, oh, I'm going to pay you more, I'm going to pay you less, I'm going to fire you, I'm going to whatever. All you have is vision. In most nonprofits, all you have is vision. You have volunteers. that are working hours. You have volunteers that are giving money. You have to lead with vision. If the inside of the corporate world, inside of the business world, small business, entrepreneurs, if you can figure that out, if you can start to apply those same principles that nonprofit leaders apply that don't have those other levers, man, you're gonna go gangbusters, because now people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, and they are. And you continue to affirm that time after time, and they are going to give more than they have to. Even if you're paying them, they're going to give more. And not only are they going to give more, they're going to tell everybody about how amazing their experience is and that they're part of something bigger. And you're going to have people knocking down your door to say, how can I work for that company? Because I want to be part of something that big.
Yeah. And coming right back to, where we started, which was around, really understanding what is it that you want. And when you start employing people or bringing people on board who actually know what it is that they want, that they are in absolute direct alignment with your vision, with your mission, and they are going to be in there, boots and all, ready to go to do whatever it takes to bring the vision to life, because they've brought into it and they feel that strongly about it. Before we sort of wrap up today's show, there's one other thing that I wanted to ask you, because I know you talk about this too with your audience, and you say you're not the ball. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So where's my tennis ball? I usually have a tennis ball sitting right here. Yeah, you are not a ball. And I think a lot of us live our lives and we lead like we are a ball. And what I mean by that is a ball cannot do anything on its own, right? If you set a ball on a stage, you set a ball on your desk, you hold a ball in your hand, it's going to stay there literally forever unless some outside force moves it, right? The wind blows or somebody drops it or whatever. And I think that's how we sort of lead. We just sort of sit there waiting for the wind to blow in a certain direction. And the good news is that we are not a ball, right? There's this idea of an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless it's moved by some outside force. And that's what a ball is. It just sits there. The good news for us is that we actually have the ability to start, to stop, to change directions on our own. And so I always encourage people, don't lead like you're a ball, lead like you actually have that capacity in you to make directions. We have more control than we realize in our lives to make decisions about who's in our Jeep. Right? We have more capacity to lead the way that we want to lead rather than just by default. And so realize that we actually have this in us. We have that agency to start, to stop, to move directions. We don't have to wait for the wind to blow. We don't have to wait for somebody else to push us or to kick us or for the place to burn down for us to move. We can do that on our own. And so that's a challenge to leaders, to actually take action, to not just sit there and wait, but to be intentional.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm going to wrap up today's show and just sort of summarize some of the key points that I think have been really, pivotal in your career, but also so important for our audience to understand. And I think I want to come back to, something we started with, which was around understanding, getting clarity for yourself, like really understanding and taking the time to understand who are you and what do you want out of the life that we have, the opportunity that we've got. What is that going to look like for you? And I'm going to say one of the tools that I've used in the past is even just pulling out a board and pulling out some pictures out of magazines and starting to create by utilizing the concept of the vision board, creating that, getting a picture in your mind about what it is that you want and what makes you tick and what makes you really, truly happy. Get to the bottom of that. Then talking about next steps, building this vision, because if you've got vision for yourself, I firmly believe then you're able to create a vision for others. If you can do that and you can paint that picture so vividly that others are like, I see that, I want that, I'm in, let me at it. They're going to be on board and you'll have no problem in being able to influence and lead others in a way that is really kind and and supportive. And then the third thing I've really pulled out of what you've talked about today is just be intentional about what you want in life. But in that intention, make sure that you are really you're creating and becoming part of something bigger. We often think quite small. We often think, gosh, I can't do that, or I could only, create this in my life, when in fact, being an infinite being, you can create whatever you want. So the bigger you allow yourself to dream, the bigger opportunities will come your way, and you potentially will be able to be part of something much, much bigger than yourself. So those are kind of my 3 takeaways from today. And if you want to add anything to that, Steve, if there's anything else in particular that you'd like to say, if there's one thing out of this that I think you guys should do, it's this.
I love it. It's a great recap. I didn't need to be here. You nailed it all. I think the only other piece would be, one of the jobs we have as leaders, we hire people, right? We try to bring people into our Jeeps. And I always encourage leaders, don't always hire just based on their capacity and their experience and their skill set. Hire based on alignment. Because if you want people that are really productive, engaged, and they stick around longer, it's the people that are lined up. And what I mean by that, they're lined up with their values match your values as a company. Their values line up with your vision. The job responsibilities line up with their passion and their strengths. Those things are the most critical pieces that you can do when you're bringing a new peep into your Jeep. So everything you said was spot on. I would just throw that piece in there as well.
Which is a fantastic thing to add, because I think that is super important. And often as leaders, we are required to employ and bring new members onto our team, and sometimes we neglect to actually ask those questions, because it's beneficial for you as the leader and for your organization, but it's equally as beneficial for that new employee to make sure that they're in alignment. Otherwise,
Right.
like Steve, you're giving them a promotion because you've noticed a particular aspect of their skill set or their behavior, but they're not necessarily aligned, and they'll end up being either unhappy, miserable, or saying to you, hey, this is not a good fit for me. I feel like a square peg in a round hole, and I need to go back to my round hole, please. So that being said, guys, I want to say thank you so much to Steve for being an amazing guest today and sharing all of his wisdom and his experience of, the last 30 odd years in leadership. And I also want to just say thank you so much for really stepping out and doing something for humanity, and really bringing, your community together to actually help another. I think that's, I didn't want that to go unnoticed, because I think that's really, really important. So thank you for doing that. For everybody else who's watching today, thank you very much for joining. We really appreciate you tuning into the Unlock Show. As you know, we go live every Wednesday and Friday at 10 a.m. Brisbane time, talking about all things to do with business, family, and life. In particular, we often will talk about how to create your own live show so that you too can bring amazing people just like Steve to the forefront and to share their knowledge and expertise to be able to help others. So if you want to learn how to do that, then I would encourage you to go and get, go to tracyandwilson.com and just reach out, and we can have a bit of a chat about that. And if you would like to hear more of, Steve, then I would encourage you to head on over to Steve's website, which I'm just going to pop up onto the screen right now. And if you want some help in really understanding how to become a better leader, how to even kind of unwrap what your special and unique gifts are, then I would recommend that you have that chat with Steve. So stevefredlund.com, so stevefredlund.com. Head on over there and make a time to have a further chat with Steve, and just see where things go. I'm sure that he would love that.
That would be awesome.
All right. So that being said, guys, I'm going to say thank you very much, and I'm going to see you guys again on another episode of The Unlock Show at 10 a.m. on either Wednesday or Friday very, very soon. Thanks, guys. And as I always say as we tune out with the show, is go and live your life unlocked, because there is just no other way. Thanks, guys, and bye for now.